Hey everyone, today's video is going to cover something I think we may have glossed over in episode 6 of The Bad Batch. This small detail may help us understand where The Bad Batch Season 2 is headed. But first, I'll say this, episode 6 finally gave purpose to The Bad Batch, who have spent the last 2 episodes on pointless missions, and yes, I'm aware that episode 5 was not completely pointless because there was a small connection to the Zepho, but ultimately that doesn't matter to The Bad Batch. They're longing to get back into the fight that matters to them, which is the fight against the Empire. This week's episode gave them the chance to finally get back in that fight. While we saw them take on the Empire in the first 2 episodes, it was still just part of a mission to claim treasure for Sid. So here's the thing though that I think might get glossed over that will help us see some sort of direction for the season. While they're on another job for Sid, Omega runs off to do Omega things, and she comes across the Wookie Jedi Gungi being tortured by the Vanguard droids. They plan to sell him to a buyer that wants him alive. Now, I think this quick detail foreshadows something that is going to be really important in the Bad Batch story, and ultimately the story of Star Wars where it's headed right now. My theory is that this buyer is probably somebody connected to Mount Tantiss. Mount Tantiss was a mountain on the planet of Wayland. In canon, this is where the Empire relocated their cloning program after Kamino. We learned of this in Season 1 of The Bad Batch. But this mountain has been around in legends since Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire novel in 1991. In the novel, Mount Tantiss is the location of Palpatine's greatest storehouse. Guarded by the Dark Jedi Sabaoth, this facility stored all sorts of Palpatine's treasures, but most important was the cloning cylinders that Grand Admiral Thrawn used to create a clone army for his fleet. At this point in the Empire's reign, Palpatine is very focused on cloning projects, as one of his main goals was to achieve immortality. Of course, in The Rise of Skywalker, we see that he was eventually able to transfer his spirit into a deteriorated body. Cheating death was a goal shared by most Sith. Darth Tenebris thought the answer lay in essence transfer, while his apprentice Plagueis desired a way to prolong the life of his physical body indefinitely. And I believe this was what Palpatine was interested in as well, but ultimately settled for transferring his spirit into a clone. Back to the Bad Batch episode, I think that Gungi is actually a desirable being for Palpatine's goals. Much like Grogu, Wookiees were long-lived species. Their lifespan averaged 400 years, and Gungi was also Force-sensitive. Both of these traits would be of great interest to Palpatine's goals of studying cloning and how he might be able to create a body that would not die. So if you read the Darth Plagueis novel, you know that his master Plagueis was very interested in the way that midichlorians interacted with living beings, and he obsessed over his studies in hopes of discovering a link between midichlorians and immortality. So with Palpatine continuing much of his master's work, beings like Gungi and Grogu would be invaluable to his research. I think we're going to see the Bad Batch interact with Mount Tantiss and these cloning experiments as the show develops. Imagine the events of the Bad Batch setting up for Grogu's story in The Mandalorian. Is it possible that the clones go to Mount Tantiss and discover Grogu there? Maybe they rescue him and somehow that's how he ends up on the remote planet that Mando finds him on. There's so much about Grogu's story we still don't know. Additionally, the potential for Heir to the Empire's storyline taking shape in canon is really fascinating to me. The pieces are really starting to appear. Mount Tantiss, the Empire's investment in cloning facilities, and the looming threat of Thrawn all set up some really cool potential for this awesome story to take shape in canon. As for the rest of this week's episode, I thought it was really great. Probably my second favorite to the Crosshair episode. I love that we got to visit Kashyyyk and see the Bad Batch work with a young Jedi to liberate part of his homeworld from the grip of the Empire. Helping this Wookiee tribe is the type of mission I believe characters like Echo and Hunter and even Omega are longing for, and so are we. We're longing to see the Bad Batch jump in and help the larger galaxy rather than go on treasure hunts. Let me know what you thought of this week's episode. I'm sure some will still call this episode a filler, but I think it was a subtle foreshadow of where the show could go this season. Let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Do you think the Bad Batch is going to connect us with Mount Tantiss a little bit more? I hope you have a great rest of your day, and may the Force be with you.